Well, welcome to our Mental Health Monday moment this week, where our topic is establishing a healthy identity. Who are you? This is a big one today, guys. Today, we're going to dive headfirst into this topic, not only because having a healthy identity is important to our mental health, but because of the current climate that we live in. We know that there are many variables now that are lending heavily to us having an unhealthy identity, and it seems to certainly be more prevalent. Today, I have with me some experts, and trust me, I've spent some time with these ladies, and they are experts in their field. Today, we have with us Dr. Patience Ruffin. She is a licensed professional counselor and owner and founder of Counseling with Patients. And we also have here with us Dr. Courtney Williams. Dr. Courtney is a psychologist and founder of Willed by Wellness Counseling and Consulting. Ladies, thank you so much. I'm going to say experts. Thank you so much for joining us on today. This topic is very, very important, and I know that God has given you all gifts, graces, expertise, knowledge to share with us on today, and hopefully to help anyone who's dealing with carrying this weight of living up to a specific identity. That we're helping to be able to get them in a healthier space. So let's get at it. Yeah. I know you guys are ready. And so I'd like to start with 4 words that God gave me about 2 years ago. And when God gave me these words, I had no idea exactly what God wanted me to do with them. The first word that God gave me was comparison. The second word that God gave me was covetousness. The third word, competition. And then the fourth word, compromise. And so as time went on, as God is always intentional and strategic, right? I kind of got to understand what these words meant because I saw a lot of this, and I'm still seeing a lot of this. People living their lives in comparison, and then how comparison then leads to covetousness, and you coveting what somebody has because you don't have it. And then that then leads to living a life of competition, right? One upping somebody. And what God shared with me is that, that compromises the identity, that your God given identity. Not only compromises your identity, but it compromises relationships and certainly compromises your mental health. So, what are some characteristics of a person who's operating with an unhealthy identity, and how does seeking that identity contribute negatively to their mental health?
Mm. Now that's a word. That's a lot. Um, I think for me, when I hear the phrase like unhealthy identity, I think about folks that just aren't happy with themselves. Um, it's the opposite of self-love to me. And I think about folks that want to change things about themselves that perhaps are unchanging. And there is a lot of self doubt, there's a lot of insecurity, there's a lot of um, self hate. And for me, that translates into negative self talk, instability in relationships. It it manifests into just people not living in their full capacity, in their full essence. So unhealthy identity looks like that for me.
Yeah, and that's the compromise piece that I mean, because again, Dr. Patience, I know you're going to chime in. I know you got plenty to say, but that's the compromise piece. And again, it had to become tangible for me because I'm like, God, how is all of this tied together. But you just spoke to that, not having a healthy sense of who you are, or always looking to become somebody else, how it compromises really who you were created to be. And there's an unsettling and unrest in that person because they're always seeking to live up to another specific identity that does not align with who they were originally created to be. Go ahead and share.
I think that listening to both of you, it's this living based on what I perceive people want me to be. So there is no authenticity, right? There is a lack of genuineness because I am often thinking about what does this person want me to be, or what will people accept, versus being true to who we are, which then increases, you see a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of doubt, right? And I agree, relationships that can't be, that aren't stable because you're not getting the real version of me because I don't know what that looks like
Anymore.
exactly. And so sometimes anymore or not, I never knew because I was living what my parents expected me to be, or I was doing what a partner expected me to be, or my job expected me to be,
Or society.
or society norm says I should be. And then when you strip that away, I have no idea who I am and what that looks like for me. Mhm.
That's good. That's good. And so, I hear everything that both of you all are saying. You have shared greatly, even just, opening up this conversation. And I think about, you know, what is acceptable? What do people think is an acceptable identity to possess? What shapes that? So I want to talk about some of the things now that set the benchmark for people. To say, oh, I want to identify like this, or I want to identify like that. What are some of the things now that people are getting their information from to say this is the identity that I want to take on? Speak to some of that.
Well, to follow up with what I said about society, I think that plays a big role
Mhm.
in the messages that we internalize about ourselves. And I think about that especially for Black women. So my company is specifically designed to work with Black women and girls. And a lot of the conversations that I'm having is around what society projects onto us and the expectations that society has of us to show up a certain way, and how we internalize that over time, and what is our identity, and then what is it that people are telling us our identity should be. And oftentimes those are two different things. And so a lot of the work that we're doing in therapy and with my coaching clients is, how do we unlearn those things that society has projected onto us, saying what we should be, what we are, and all the in betweens? And how do we relearn our own way of being by our own definitions, by our own standards? And sometimes it's hard to parse that out,
Mhm.
you know? Sometimes it's really hard to parse that out.
I would agree. I think it's the part you said that's so telling is, and normalizing that it's okay to not live up to society's norms or what society is saying that I should be.
Right.
When you are looking at social media and people are becoming millionaires, or people have all these likes or followers, and people are saying, see, that's who you want to be. That's cool. That's what's acceptable. It's hard to say, well, no, just who are you? Figure out who you are. And so how do we normalize for our clients, for our children, that it is okay to be who God created you to be? Mhm.
No, that speaks volumes. My mind is going in 1,000 different directions, because you talk about people becoming millionaires, and so you feel like, okay, well, If I'm not a millionaire, then I'm not successful. I haven't, arrived. I haven't gotten to a specific place in my life. But I also think about, and we're gonna go here. Bigger everything is better. You know, Bigger lips. You know, Bigger rear ends, and I see a lot of the things that people are saying, I'm willing to risk everything in order to be able to have this identity. And so that takes me back to Eve, even in the Garden of Eden, who obviously dealt with, and maybe not so obviously, dealt with the spirit of offense. God had given her the keys, not just to the city, but the keys to the universe, the keys to the kingdom. She had everything in hand. But because she allowed Satan to come up and whisper to her, but you don't have this, she was willing, so much so, to risk everything that God had given unto her because she dealt with the spirit of offense. God offended her by not giving her this particular thing. Let's talk about that. How people are, again, and that's that spirit of comparison coming up, about how people are, again, willing to risk everything, lay on the line what God has already given to them in order to get what they feel like they don't have and what they need to be able to identify in a specific way.
Mhm. I think the part about the sacrifice is values and priorities and what is important to you. I think I don't know, but in my practice, I often have challenged my clients in asking them, like, what do you value? What are your values? What do those look like?
That's good.
Because oftentimes, not the tangible things that you value, but what are your values? And then what are your priorities? Because when those two things are not aligned, then you feel uncomfortable, then there is something going on with you. And I think what happens is we don't really have a clear understanding of what our values are. And so we are always chasing something because we're not grounded in much. And so we're looking like, well, they seem happy. Well, they seem like because they have this makes them content and happy or joyful, knowing that, a picture on a social media website is not a full representation of anyone's life. And so we get lost in that. And so I think that part about sacrificing and giving away, we're not rooted enough in our identity, our sense of self, who we are, to be able to say, it's okay if I'm not a millionaire. It's okay if I don't have these particular things, because what I do have is enough. And I am enough, and I am worthy of those things. And I think that just really gets lost, especially with the introduction of being a click away, a heart away, a like away, from somebody telling you you're special, you're great, you're amazing. So we want that. We feel like we need that.
The affirmation
Yes.
that people are in search of, and they're willing to do anything to get that validation and affirmation. Go ahead, Dr. Courtney.
Yeah, and I mean, the research speaks to how a comment, like there is a dopamine response to that. So we are literally getting that reward that we're seeking with social media, and the comparison piece that social media brings, increases. You only see what people want you to see on social media, and people aren't posting the bad things. They're only posting what's been filtered literally and figuratively online. And so we're comparing ourselves to someone's filtered image, right? Not even of the authentic version of what happened to get to that image. And there was something else that I was going to say about something that you said. What did you say?
We give it back to her, Lord.
When it comes back, I will, I'll circle back to it. But there was something else that you said that I was like, oh.
It'll come back.
So
No, that's good. I just wish, because I'm seeing it not only from afar, but I'm seeing it so close up, even in my own family. And I'm like,
Yeah.
we came from the same, fabric. So how is this, and of course, sometimes it's based on different things, really, again, how grounded you are in who you are and how satisfied you are within yourself, that even as you see these things on social media or in the world or wherever, that you don't have to feel so taken by those things and gravitating again towards the things that you see and saying, okay, this is who I need to be looking like or acting like, or these are the things that I need to possess to be able to identify a specific kind of way. I think about, everything now has to be, designer and this and that. And so, of course, then that speaks to, again, your designer letters on your shirt or on your bag. And, because women are not just dealing with this, males are identifying with this too. My husband and I, we were talking about, he was like, I'm so glad that you don't make me feel like, we have to be this or that, that you are really satisfied and content in who we are and what we possess, that we don't ever have to keep up with the Joneses or the Williamses or whoever they might be, right? So let's talk about that, right? Because as powerful as social media is, we want to be able to try to have some kind of an impact on, again, the people who are being heavily impacted by living up to this identity, and they found themselves in this identity crisis. So how do we heal those places of wholeness that have been breached and get people to live in a state of contentment? Like Paul talks about, in whatsoever state I am in, I have learned to be content. And I understand it's a process, but I believe too, if we could pass the mic around to the people that we see, who look like they have it all together, and they could, really speak transparently and say, I really don't, you know, um, I do wonder how that would play out to people and say, you know what, well, maybe I don't have to try to live up to what they're doing, because guess what? They don't have it all together. So, how do we create avenues, gateways for people that can be as impactful like social media to, again, have people to live in a state of contentment versus compromise?
Well, one, I think it's conversations like this. I think it's spaces that we can create to be candid, to be authentic, to talk about our failures, our downfalls, having those moments of vulnerability. I think it's about really building those communities so that we are able to, um, unlearn the performative nature that I think so many of us have, and just deprogram that. Just be, right? I think so many times we feel like we have to be on or show up a certain way. And again, I think about that, me having just left corporate America, there was a lot of ways in which, there were so many mental gymnastics that I was doing on a daily basis, code switching and, office politics. And, that shows up in so many different spaces and settings. But where are the places where you can just like be and be fully yourself without having to code switch, without having to mince your words, without having to, water down what it is that you're saying, um, without worrying about policing. So give me communities where that's happening, more of that, more genuine conversations.
That's good. That's key. or at least one of the things that I find to be key. You have to surround yourself with people who allow you to be exactly who you are, and people who do not promote or fan the flame of seeking these things that will help us to be perceived a specific kind of way. And so I think that that's good, that you brought that out. Sometimes it takes, you can't change people, but you can change the people that you're around so that you can help yourself to be able to heal from living in a space really that you're not comfortable living in, trying to live up again to this identity. And I find people living in a quiet state of desperation, never able really to articulate that. And even if they could, I wonder sometimes if they even know that they're living there, trying to always catch up to the next thing or the next person or the next high that they feel like maybe some of these other people are experiencing that they are not experiencing. And our time is well spent, but I would love for you to close us out. What closing remarks would you have for a person who has found themselves, they know, hey, it's me. I've been living in this space of this unhealthy identity. What would you offer to them as we close out this segment?
I think, as Dr. Courtney said, vulnerability is key. I think but vulnerability is scary. And so being willing to address the fear, because usually when I have to really seek who I am, that's a scary place to go to because of acceptance, because of the comparison. Will people understand me? Will I find community, or am I alone? We know that group therapy is the most powerful form of therapy because I find people who can connect, can relate. I'm not on an island. I'm not alone. And so finding those spaces, I agree, the community, and being able to be vulnerable and being able to say that I can show up as my most authentic self, as scary as that may be, and people will embrace me. People will accept me. I will have community, because under all of that is fear of being alone, fear of not having connection. But I think if we have dialogue like this in groups, in therapy, where I am able to address whatever that fear is, deal with it, and then get to know who I am and love that version of me and believe that I am enough, then that changes my perspective about how I believe I need to show up, or I want to show up with other people. I'm okay just being. I think that's what you said, Dr. Courtney, to just be. Let me be clear, that's not easy.
It's not.
That is, I'm not saying it very cocky, like, and I'll go do it. I'm saying I know that is challenging, and that is a journey, and it's doable.
And I want to add this too. I want to make it clear too that it is not just an individual thing. It is a societal, systemic issue. The reason that people have unhealthy identities, aren't happy with themselves, feel like they have to chase the next best thing. These are intergenerational, systemic things that are happening and impacting us on an individual level. We live in a capitalist society where there's always the economic burden to make millions of dollars, right? And so I think it's important to name that yes, we are focusing on the individual, but there also has to be communal, systemic changes to happen so that we can rest. So we're really fighting a system.
Yeah, we are.
True.
We are. But we are part of a system, a kingdom system, and the Bible reminds us that the blessing of the Lord makes us rich and adds no sorrow. So I don't even want a blessing unless it has come from God, because I know that if it has come from God, then God has given me the grace to be able to steward that blessing well, and there's no sorrow that's going to come attached to that. thank you, ladies, for joining us today for this Mental Health Monday moment. I tell you, you all have been a blessing, and my prayer is for anyone who is listening out there and you say, hey, I feel like I've been dealing with this. If you are dealing with being in a space of having an unhealthy identity, please know that we're going to place these two therapists, we're going to place their information out on the screen so that you can connect with them or you can connect with one of our therapists that we have on our website at www.Mtzionnashville.org. And if you click on the Care tab and then click on Crisis and Counseling Resources, there's a myriad of counselors and therapists out there, and surely there is one out there who will be able to fit your need. So as we close out on today, of course, our prayer is always that you would live and be in good health and prosper even as your soul has prospered. Thank you for joining us on today, and we'll look forward to you joining us on next week. Until then, God bless.